Chapter 2. Triss Merigold blew into her frozen hands, wriggled her fingers, and murmured a magic formula. Her horse, a gelding, immediately reacted to the spell, snorting and turning its head, looking at the enchantress with eyes made watery by the cold and wind. "You've got two options, old thing," said Triss, pulling on her gloves. "Either you get used to magic, or I sell you to some peasants to pull a plough." The gelding pricked up its ears, snorted vapour through its nostrils, and obediently started down the wooded mountainside. The magician leaned over in the saddle, avoiding being lashed by the frosty branches. The magic worked quickly. She stopped feeling the sting of cold in her elbows and on her neck, and the unpleasant sensation of cold which had made her hunch her shoulders and draw her head in disappeared. The spell, warming her, also muffled the hunger which had been eating at her for several hours. Triss cheered up, made herself comfortable in the saddle, and, with greater attention than before, started to take stock of her surroundings. Ever since she had left the beaten track, she had been guided by the greyish-white wall of mountains and their snow-capped summits, which glistened gold in those rare moments when the sun pierced the clouds, usually in the morning or just before sunset. Now that she was closer to the mountain chain, she had to take greater care. The land around Kaer Morhen was famous for its wildness and inaccessibility, and the gap in the granite wall that was a vital landmark was not easy for an inexperienced eye to find. It was enough to turn down one of the numerous gullies and gorges to lose sight of it, and even she, who knew the land, knew the way, and knew where to look for the pass, could not allow herself to lose her concentration for an instant. The forest came to an end. A wide valley opened before the enchantress, strewn with boulders which ran across the valley to the sheer mountain slope on the other side. The Gwenllech, the river of white stones, flowed down the heart of the valley, foam seething between the boulders and logs washed along by the current. Here in its upper reaches, the Gwenllech was no more than a wide but shallow stream. Up here it could be crossed without any difficulty. Lower down in Caedwen, in its middle reaches, the river was an insurmountable obstacle, rushing and breaking against the beds of its steep chasms. The gelding, driven into the water, hastened its step, clearly wanting to reach the opposite bank as quickly as possible. Triss held it back lightly. The stream was shallow, reaching just above the horse's fetlocks, but the pebbles covering the bed were slippery, and the current was sharp and quick. The water churned and foamed around her mount's legs. The magician looked up at the sky. The growing cold and increasing wind here in the mountains could herald a blizzard, and she did not find the prospect of spending yet another night in a grotto or rocky nook too attractive. She could, if she had to, continue her journey even through a blizzard. She could locate the path using telepathy. She could, using magic, make herself insensitive to the cold. She could, if she had to, but she preferred not to have to. Luckily, Kaer Morhen was already close. Triss urged the gelding onto flat scree, over an enormous heap of stones washed down by glaciers and streams, and rode into a narrow pass between rocky outcrops. The gorge walls rose vertically, and seemed to meet high above her, only divided by a narrow line of sky. It grew warmer. The wind, howling above the rocks, could no longer reach to lash and sting at her. The pass broadened, leading through a ravine, and then into the valley, opening onto a huge depression, covered by forest, which stretched out amidst jagged boulders. The magician ignored the gentle, accessible depression rim and rode down towards the forest, into the thick backwoods. Dry branches cracked under the gelding's hooves. Forced to step over fallen tree trunks, the horse snorted, danced, and stamped. Triss pulled at the reins, tugged at her mount's shaggy ear, and scolded it harshly with spiteful allusions to its lameness. The steed, looking for all the world as though it were ashamed of itself, walked with a more even and sprightly gait, and picked its way through the thicket. Before long, they emerged onto clearer land, riding along the trough of a stream which barely trickled along the ravine bed. The magician looked around carefully, finally finding what she was looking for. Over the gully, supported horizontally by enormous boulders, lay a mighty tree trunk, dark, bare, and turning green with moss. Triss rode closer, wanting to make sure this was, indeed, the trail, and not a tree accidentally felled in a gale. But she spied a narrow, indistinct pathway disappearing into the woods. She could not be mistaken. This was definitely the trail. a path encircling the old castle of Kaer Morhen, and beset with obstacles, where witches trained to improve their running speeds and controlled breathing. The path was known as the Trail, but Triss knew young witches had given it their own name, the Killer. She clung to the horse's neck and slowly rode under the trunk. At that moment, she heard stones grating and the fast, light footsteps of someone running. She turned in her saddle, pulled on the reins, and waited for the Witcher to run out onto the log. A Witcher did run out onto the log, flitted along it like an arrow without slowing down, without even using his arms to aid his balance, running nimbly, fluently, with incredible grace. He flashed by, approaching and disappearing amongst the trees without disturbing a single branch. Triss sighed loudly, shaking her head in disbelief, because the Witcher, judging by his height and build, was only about 12. The magician eased the reins, nudged the horse with her heels, and trotted upstream. She knew the trail cut across the ravine once more, at a spot known as the Gullet. She wanted to catch a glimpse of the little Witcher once again. Children had not been trained in Kaer Morhen for near to a quarter of a century. She was not in a great hurry. The narrow killer path meandered and looped its way through the forest, and, in order to master it, the little Witcher would take far longer than she would, following the shortcut. However, she could not loiter either. Beyond the Gullet, the trail turned into the woods and led straight to the fortress. If she did not catch the boy at the precipice, she might not see him at all. She had already visited Kaer Morhen a few times, and knew she saw only what the witches wanted her to see. Triss was not so naive as to be unaware that they wanted to show her only a tiny fraction of the things to be seen in Kaer Morhen. After a few minutes riding along the stony trough of the stream, she caught sight of the Gullet. A leap over the gully, created by two huge mossy rocks, overgrown with gnarled, stunted trees. She released the reins. The horse snorted and lowered its head towards the water, trickling between pebbles. She did not have to wait long. The Witcher's silhouette appeared on the rock, and the boy jumped, not slowing his pace. The magician heard the soft smack of his landing, and a moment later, a rattle of stones, the dull thud of a fall, and a quiet cry, or rather a squeal. Triss instantly leapt from her saddle, threw the fur off her shoulders, and dashed across the mountainside, pulling herself up using tree branches and roots. Momentum aided her climb until she slipped on the conifer needles and fell to her knees next to a figure huddled on the stones. The youngster, on seeing her, jumped up like a spring, backed away in a flash, and nimbly grabbed the sword slung across his back, then tripped and collapsed between the junipers and pines. The magician did not rise from her knees. She stared at the boy and opened her mouth in surprise. Because it was not a boy. From beneath an ash-blonde fringe, poorly and unevenly cut, enormous emerald eyes, the predominant features in a small face with a narrow chin and upturned nose, stared out at her. There was fear in the eyes. "Don't be afraid," Triss said tentatively. The girl opened her eyes even wider. She was hardly out of breath and did not appear to be sweating. It was clear she had already run the killer more than once. "Nothing's happened to you?" The girl did not reply. Instead, she sprang up, hissed with pain, shifted her weight to her left leg, bent over and rubbed her knee. She was dressed in a sort of leather suit, sewn together, or rather stuck together, in a way which would make any tailor who took pride in his craft howl in horror and despair. The only pieces of her equipment which seemed to be relatively new and fitted her were her knee-high boots, her belts and her sword. But more precisely, her little sword. "Don't be afraid," repeated Triss, still not rising from her knees. "I heard your fall and was scared. That's why I rushed here. I slept," murmured the girl. "Have you hurt yourself?" "No. You?" The enchantress laughed, tried to get up, winced and swore at the pain in her ankle. She sat down and carefully straightened her foot, swearing once more. "Come here, little one. Help me get up. I'm not little." "If you say so. In that case, what are you?" "A witcher." "Ha! So come here and help me get up, witcher." The girl did not move from the spot. She shifted her weight from foot to foot, and her hands, in their fingerless woolen gloves, toyed with her sword belt as she glanced suspiciously at Triss. "Have no fear," said the enchantress with a smile. I'm not a bandit or outsider. I'm called Tris Merigold, and I'm going to Kaer Morhen. The witches know me. Don't gape at me. I respect your suspicion, but be reasonable. Would I have got this far if I hadn't known the way? Have you ever met a human on the trail? The girl overcame her hesitation, approached and stretched out her hand. Tris stood with only a little assistance, because she was not concerned with having help. She wanted a closer look at the girl, and to touch her. The green eyes of the little witcher girl betrayed no signs of mutation, and the touch of her little hand did not produce the slight, pleasant, tingling sensation so characteristic of witches. Although she ran the killer path with a sword slung across her back, the ashen-haired girl had not been subjected to the trial of grasses or to changes. Of that, Tris was certain. Show me your knee, little one. I'm not little. Sorry, but surely you have a name. I do, I'm Ciri. It's a pleasure. A bit closer, if you please, Ciri. It's nothing. I want to see what nothing looks like. Ah, that's what I thought. Nothing looks remarkably like torn trousers and skin grazed down to raw flesh. Stand still, and don't be scared. I'm not scared. Ow! The magician laughed and rubbed her palm, itching from casting the spell against her hip. The girl bent over and gazed at her knee. Oh, she said. It doesn't hurt any more, and there's no hole. Was that magic? You've guessed it. Are you a witch? Guessed again, although I prefer to be called an enchantress. To avoid getting it wrong, you can call me by my name. Tris. Just Tris. Come on, Ciri. My horse is waiting at the bottom. We'll go to Kaer Morhen together. I ought to run. Ciri shook her head. It's not good to stop running, because you get milk in your muscles. Geralt says. Geralt is at the keep. Ciri frowned, pinched her lips together, and shot a glance at the enchantress from beneath her ashen fringe. Tris chuckled again. All right, she said. I won't ask. A secret's a secret, and you're right not to disclose it to someone you hardly know. Come on. When we get there, we'll see who's at the castle and who isn't. And don't worry about your muscles. I know what to do about lactic acid. Ah, here's my mount. I'll help you. She stretched out her hand, but Ciri didn't need any help. She jumped agilely into the saddle, lightly, almost without taking off. The gelding started, surprised, and stamped, but the girl quickly took up the reins and reassured it. You know how to handle a horse, I see. I can handle anything. Move up towards the pommel. Tris slipped her foot into the stirrup and caught hold of the mane. Make a bit of room for me, and don't poke my eye out with that sword. The gelding, spurred on by her heels, moved off along the stream bed at a walking pace. They rode across another gully and climbed the rounded mountainside. From there, they could see the ruins of Kaer Morhen, huddled against the stone precipices. The partially demolished trapezium of the defensive wall, the remains of the barbican and gate, the thick, blunt column of the donjon. The gelding snorted and jerked its head, crossing what remained of the bridge over the moat. Tris tugged at the reins. The decaying skulls and skeletons strewn across the riverbed made no impression on her. She had seen them before. I don't like this, the girl suddenly remarked. It's not as it should be. The dead should be buried in the ground, under a barrow, shouldn't they? They should, the magician agreed calmly. I think so too, but the witches treat this graveyard as a reminder. Reminder of what? Kaer Morhen, Tris said, as she guided the horse towards the shattered arcades, was assaulted. There was a bloody battle here, in which almost all the witches died. Only those who weren't in the keep at the time survived. Who attacked them, and why? I don't know, she lied. It was a terribly long time ago, Ciri. Ask the witches about it. I have, grunted the girl, but they didn't want to tell me. I can understand that, thought the magician. A child trying to be a witcher, a girl at that, who has not undergone the mutations, should not be told such things. A child like that should not hear about the massacre. A child like that should not be terrified by the prospect that they too may one day hear words describing it, like those which were screamed by the fanatics who marched on Kaer Morhen long ago. mutant, monster, freak, damned by the gods, a creature contrary to nature. No, I do not blame the witches for not telling you about it, little Ciri, and I shan't tell you either. I have even more reason to be silent, because I am a wizard, and without the aid of wizards, those fanatics would never have conquered the castle, and that hideous lampoon, that widely distributed monstrum which stirred the fanatics up and drove them to such wickedness, was also, apparently, some wizard's anonymous work. But I, little Ciri, do not recognize collective responsibility. I do not feel the need to expiate the events which took place half a century before my birth. And the skeletons, which are meant to serve as an eternal reminder, will ultimately rot away completely, disintegrate into dust and be forgotten, will disappear with the wind, which constantly whips the mountainside. "They don't want to lie like that," said Ciri suddenly. "They don't want to be a symbol, a bad conscience or a warning. But neither do they want their dust to be swept away by the wind." Triss raised her head, hearing a change in the girl's voice. Immediately she sensed a magical aura, a pulsating and a rush of blood in her temples. She grew tense, but did not utter a word, afraid of breaking into or disrupting what was happening. "An ordinary barrow." Ciri's voice was becoming more and more unnatural, metallic, cold and menacing. "A mound of earth which will be overgrown with nettles. Death has cold blue eyes, and the height of the obelisk does not matter, nor does the writing engraved on it matter. Who can know that better than you, Triss Merigold, the 14th one of the hill?" The enchantress froze. She saw the girl's hands clench the horse's mane. "You died on the hill, Triss Merigold." The strange, evil voice spoke again. "Why have you come here? Go back. Go back at once and take this child, the child of elder blood, with you. Return her to those to whom she belongs. Do this, 14th one, because if you do not, you will die once more. The day will come when the hill will claim you. The mass grave and the obelisk on which your name is engraved will claim you." The gelding neighed loudly, tossing its head. Ciri jerked, suddenly, shuddered. "What happened?" asked Triss, trying to control her voice. Ciri coughed, passed both hands through her hair, and rubbed her face. "Nothing," she muttered hesitantly. "I'm tired. That's why I fell asleep. I ought to run." The magical aura disappeared. Triss experienced a sudden cold wave sweep through her entire body. She tried to convince herself it was the effect of the defensive spell dying away, but she knew that wasn't true. She glanced up at the stone blocks of the castle, the black, empty eye sockets of its ruined loopholes gaping at her. A shudder ran through her. The horse's shoes rang against the slabs in the courtyard. The magician quickly leapt from the saddle and held out her hand to Ciri. Taking advantage of the touch of their hands, she carefully emitted a magical impulse, and was astounded, because she didn't feel anything, no reaction, no reply, and no resistance. In the girl, who had, just a moment ago, manifested an exceptionally strong aura, there was not a trace of magic. She was now an ordinary, badly dressed child whose hair had been incompetently cut. But a moment ago, this child had been no ordinary child. Triss did not have time to ponder the strange event. The grate of an iron-clad door reached her, coming from the dark void of the corridor, which gaped behind the battered portal. She slipped the fur cape from her shoulders, removed her fox-fur hat, and, with a swift movement of the head, tousled her hair, long, full locks the colour of fresh chestnuts, with a sheen of gold, her pride and identifying characteristic. Ciri sighed with admiration. Triss smiled, pleased by the effect she'd had. Beautiful, long, loose hair was a rarity, an indication of a woman's position, her status, the sign of a free woman, a woman who belonged to herself. The sign of an unusual woman, because normal maidens wore their hair in plaits. Normal married women hid theirs beneath a caul or a coif. Women of high birth, including queens, curled their hair and styled it. Warriors cut it short. Only druids and magicians, and whores, wore their hair naturally so as to emphasize their independence and freedom. The witches appeared unexpectedly and silently, as usual, and also as usual from nowhere. They stood before her, tall, slim, their arms crossed, the weight of their bodies on their left legs, a position from which she knew they could attack in a split second. Ciri stood next to them, in an identical position. In her ludicrous clothes, she looked very funny. "Welcome to Kaer Morhen, Triss."
"Greetings, Geralt."
He had changed. He gave the impression of having aged. Triss knew that, biologically, this was impossible. Witchers aged, certainly, but too slowly for an ordinary mortal or a magician as young as her to notice the changes. But one glance was enough for her to realize that although mutation could hold back the physical process of aging, it did not alter the mental. Geralt's face, slashed by wrinkles, was the best evidence of this. With a sense of deep sorrow, Triss tore her gaze away from the white-haired witcher's eyes. Eyes which had evidently seen too much. What's more, she saw nothing of what she had expected in those eyes. "Welcome," he repeated. "We are glad you've come." Eskil stood next to Geralt, resembling the wolf like a brother, apart from the colour of his hair and the long scar which disfigured his cheek. And the youngest of the Kaer Morhen witches, Lambert, was there, with his usual ugly, mocking expression. Vesemir was not there. "Welcome, and come in," said Eskil. "It is as cold and blustery as if someone has hung themselves. Ciri, where are you off to? The invitation does not apply to you. The sun is still high. Even if it is obscured, you can still train."
"Hey!" The enchantress tossed her hair. "Politeness comes cheap in Witch's Keep now, I see. Ciri was the first to greet me and brought me to the castle. She ought to keep me company."
"She's undergoing training here, Marigold." Lambert grimaced in a parody of a smile. He always called her that, Marigold, without giving her a title or a name. Triss hated it. "She is a student, not a major domo. Welcoming guests, even such pleasant ones as yourself, is not one of her duties. We're off, Ciri." Triss gave a little shrug, pretending not to see Geralt and Eskil's embarrassed expressions. She did not say anything, not wanting to embarrass them further. And, above all, she did not want them to see how very intrigued and fascinated she was by the girl. "I'll take your horse," offered Geralt, reaching for the reins. Triss surreptitiously shifted her hand, and their palms joined. So did their eyes.
"I'll come with you," she said naturally. "There are a few little things in the saddlebags which I'll need."
"You gave me a very disagreeable experience not so long ago," he muttered, as soon as they had entered the stable. "I studied your impressive tombstone with my own eyes. The obelisk in memory of your heroic death at the Battle of Sodden. The news that it was a mistake only reached me recently. I can't understand how anyone could mistake anyone else for you, Triss."
"It's a long story," she answered. "I'll tell you sometime. And please forgive me for the disagreeable moment."
"There's nothing to forgive. I've not had many reasons to be happy of late, and the feelings I experienced on hearing that you lived cannot compare to any other, except perhaps what I feel now when I look at you."
Triss felt something explode inside her. Her fear of meeting the white-haired witcher, which had accompanied her throughout her journey, had struggled within her with her hope of having such a meeting, followed by the sight of that tired, jaded face, those sick eyes which saw everything, cold and calculating, which were unnaturally calm, but yet so infused with emotion. She threw her arms around his neck, instantly, without thinking. She caught hold of his hand, abruptly placed it on the nape of her neck, under her hair. A tingling ran down her back, penetrated her with such rapture she almost cried out. In order to muffle and restrain the cry, her lips found his lips and stuck to them. She trembled, pressing hard against him, her excitement building and increasing, forgetting herself more and more. Geralt did not forget himself. "Triss, please."
"Oh, Geralt, so much—"
"Triss." He moved her away delicately. "We're not alone. They're coming." She glanced at the entrance and saw the shadows of the approaching witches only after some time, heard their steps even later. Oh well, her hearing, which she considered very sensitive, could not compete with that of a witcher. "Triss, my child."
"Vesemir."
Vesemir was really very old. Who knows, he could be even older than Kaer Morhen. But he walked towards her with a brisk, energetic and sprightly step. His grip was vigorous, and his hands strong.
"I am happy to see you again, grandfather."
"Give me a kiss." "No, not on the hand, little sorceress. You can kiss my hand when I'm resting on my bier, which will no doubt be soon." "Oh, Triss, it is a good thing you have come. Who can cure me if not you?"
"Cure you? Of what? Of behaving like a child, surely. Take your hand from my backside, old man, or I'll set fire to that grey beard of yours."
"Forgive me. I keep forgetting you're grown up, and I can no longer put you on my knee and pat you. As to my health, oh, Triss, old age is no joke. My bones ache so I want to howl. Will you help an old man, child?"
"I will." The enchantress freed herself from his bear-like embrace and cast her eye over the witcher accompanying Vesemir. He was young, apparently the same age as Lambert, and wore a short black beard which did not hide the severe disfigurement left behind by smallpox. This was unusual. Witchers were generally highly immune to infectious diseases.
"Triss Merigold, Cohen."
Geralt introduced them to each other.
"This is Cohen's first winter with us. He comes from the north, from Porvis."
The young witcher bowed. He had unusually pale yellow-green irises, and the whites of his eyes, riddled with red threads, indicated difficult and troublesome processes during his mutation.
"Let us go, child," uttered Vesemir, taking her by the arm. "The stable is no place to welcome a guest, but I couldn't wait to see you."
In the courtyard, in a recess in the wall sheltered from the wind, Ciri was training under Lambert's instructions. Deftly balancing on a beam hanging on chains, she was attacking, with her sword, a leather sack bound with straps to make it resemble a human torso. Triss stopped to watch.
"Wrong!" yelled Lambert. "You're getting too close. Don't hack blindly at it. I told you, the very tip of the sword at the carotid artery. Where does a humanoid have its carotid artery? On top of its head? What's happening? Concentrate, princess."
"Ah," thought Triss. "So it is truth, not a legend. She is the one. I guessed correctly." She decided to attack without delay, not allowing the witches to try any ruses. "The famous child surprise?" she said, indicating Ciri. "I see you have applied yourselves to fulfilling the demands of fate and destiny. But it seems you have muddled the stories, boys. In the fairy tales I was told, shepherdesses and orphans become princesses, but here I see a princess is becoming a witcher. Does that not appear somewhat daring to you?" Vesemir glanced at Geralt. The white-haired witcher remained silent, his face perfectly still. He did not react with even the slightest quiver of his eyelids to Vesemir's unspoken request for support.
"It's not what you think."
The old man cleared his throat.
"Geralt brought her here last autumn. She has no one apart from... Triss, how can one not believe in destiny when..."
"What has destiny to do with waving a sword around?"
"We are teaching it a fence," Geralt said quietly, turning towards her and looking her straight in the eyes. "What else are we to teach her? We know nothing else. Destiny or no, Kaer Morhen is now her home, at least for a while. Training and swordsmanship amuse her, keep her healthy and fit. They allow her to forget the tragedy she has lived through. This is her home now, Triss. She has no other."
"Masses of Cintrians," the enchantress said, holding his gaze, "fled to Verden after the defeat, to Brugge, to Meria, and the islands of Skellige. Amongst them are magnates, barons, knights, friends, relations, as well as this girl's subjects.
Friends and relations did not look for her after the war. They did not find her."
"Because she was not destined for them?" She smiled at him,
Not very sincerely, but very prettily. As prettily as she could. She did not want him to use that tone of voice. The Witcher shrugged. Triss, knowing him a little, immediately changed tactics and gave up the argument. She looked at Ciri again. The girl, agilely stepping along the balance beam, executed a half-turn, cut lightly, and immediately leapt away. The dummy struck, swayed on its rope. "Well, at last," shouted Lambert. "You finally got it. Go back and do it again. Want to make sure it wasn't a fluke." The sword, Triss turned to the witches, looks sharp. The beam looks slippery and unstable, and Lambert looks like an idiot, demoralizing the girl with all his shouting. Aren't you afraid of an unfortunate accident? Or maybe you're relying on destiny to protect the child against it? Ciri practiced for nearly 6 months without a sword, said Cohen. She knows how to move, and we're keeping an eye on her because this is her home, finished Geralt quietly but firmly, very firmly, using a tone which put an end to the discussion. Exactly, it is. Vesemir took a deep breath. Triss, you must be tired and hungry. I cannot deny it, she sighed, giving up on trying to catch Geralt's eye. To be honest, I'm on my last legs. I spent last night on the trail in a shepherd's hut, which was practically falling apart, buried in straw and sawdust. I used spells to insulate the shack. If it weren't for that, I would probably be dead. I long for clean linen. You will have supper with us now, and then you will sleep as long as you wish and rest. We have prepared the best room for you, the one in the tower, and we have put the best bed we could find in Kaer Morhen there. Thank you. Triss smiled faintly. In the tower, she thought. All right, Vesemir. Let it be the tower for today, if appearances matter so much to you. I can sleep in the tower in the best of all the beds in Kaer Morhen, although I would prefer to sleep with Geralt in the worst. Let's go, Triss. Let's go. The wind hammered against the shutters and ruffled the remains of the moth-eaten tapestries, which had been used to insulate the window. Triss lay in perfect darkness, in the best bed in the whole of Kaer Morhen. She couldn't sleep, and not because the best bed in Kaer Morhen was a dilapidated antique. Triss was thinking hard, and all the thoughts chasing sleep away revolved around one fundamental question. What had she been summoned to the fortress for? Who had summoned her? Why? For what purpose? Vesemir's illness was just a pretext. Vesemir was a witcher. The fact that he was also an old man did not change the fact that many a youngster could envy him his health. If the old man had been stung by a manticore or bitten by a werewolf, Triss would have accepted that she had been summoned to aid him. But aching bones was a joke. For an ache in his bones, not a very original complaint within the horrendously cold walls of Kaer Morhen, Vesemir could have treated with a witch's elixir, or an even simpler solution, with strong rye vodka, applied internally and externally in equal proportions. He didn't need a magician with her spells, philters, and amulets. So who had summoned her? Geralt? Triss thrashed about in the bedclothes, feeling a wave of heat come over her, and a wave of arousal, made all the stronger by anger. She swore quietly, kicked her quilt away, and rolled onto her side. The ancient bedstead squeaked and creaked. I've no control over myself, she thought. I'm behaving like a stupid adolescent, or even worse, like an old maid deprived of affection. I can't even think logically. She swore again. Of course it wasn't Geralt. Don't get excited, little one. Don't get excited. Just think of his expression in the stable. You've seen expressions like that before. You've seen them, so don't kid yourself. The foolish, contrite, embarrassed expressions of men who want to forget, who regret, who don't want to remember what happened, don't want to go back to what has been. By all the gods, little one, don't fool yourself it's different this time. It's never different, and you know it, because, after all, you've had a fair amount of experience. As far as her erotic life was concerned, Triss Merigold had the right to consider herself a typical enchantress. It had begun with the sour taste of forbidden fruit, made all the more exciting by the strict rules of the academy and the prohibitions of the mistress under whom she practiced. Then came her independence, freedom, and a crazy promiscuity which ended, as it usually does, in bitterness, disillusionment and resignation. Then, following a long period of loneliness, and the discovery that if she wanted to release her tension and stress, then someone who wanted to consider himself her lord and master, as soon as he had turned on his back and wiped the sweat from his brow, was entirely superfluous. There were far less troublesome ways of calming her nerves, ones with the additional advantages of not staining her towels with blood, not passing wind under the quilt, and not demanding breakfast. That was followed by a short-lived and entertaining fascination with the same sex, which ended in the conclusion that soiling towels, passing wind, and greediness were by no means exclusively male attributes. Finally, like all but a few magicians, Triss moved to affairs with other wizards, which proved sporadic and frustrating in their cold, technical, and almost ritual course. Then, Geralt of Rivia appeared, a witcher leading a stormy life and tied to her good friend Yennefer in a strange, turbulent, and almost violent relationship. Triss had watched them both, and was jealous, even though it seemed there was little to be jealous of. Their relationship quite obviously made them both unhappy, had led straight to destruction, pain, and yet, against all logic, it had lasted. Triss couldn't understand it, and it had fascinated her. It had fascinated her to such an extent that she had seduced the Witcher, with the help of a little magic. She had hit on a propitious moment, a moment when he and Yennefer had scratched at each other's eyes yet again and had abruptly parted. Geralt had needed warmth and had wanted to forget. No, Triss had not desired to take him away from Yennefer. As a matter of fact, her friend was more important to her than he was. But her brief relationship with the Witcher had not disappointed. She had found what she was looking for, emotions in the form of guilt, anxiety, and pain. His pain. She had experienced his emotions, it had excited her, and when they parted, she had been unable to forget it. And she had only recently understood what pain is, the moment when she had overwhelmingly wanted to be with him again. For a short while, just for a moment, to be with him. And now she was so close. Triss clenched her fist and punched the pillow. No, she thought, no, don't be silly, don't think about it, think about Ciri. Is she? Yes. She was the real reason behind her visit to Kaer Morhen. The ash-blonde girl, who here in Kaer Morhen they wanted to turn into a witcher. A real witcher. A mutant. A killing machine like themselves. It's clear, she suddenly thought, feeling a passionate arousal of an entirely different nature. It's obvious. They want to mutate the child, subject her to the trial of grasses and changes, but they don't know how to do it. Vesemir was the only witcher left from the previous generation, and he was only a fencing instructor. The laboratorium, hidden in the vaults of Kaer Morhen, with its dusty demijohns of elixirs, the alembics, ovens, and retorts. None of the witchers knew how to use them. The mutagenic elixirs had been concocted by some renegade wizard in the distant past, and then perfected over the years by the wizard's successors, who had, over the years, magically controlled the process of changes to which children were subjected. At a vital moment, the chain had snapped. There was no more magical knowledge or power. The witches had the herbs and grasses. They had the laboratorium. They knew the recipe. But they had no wizard. Who knows, she thought. Perhaps they have tried. Have they given children concoctions prepared without the use of magic? She shuddered at the thought of what might have happened to those children. And now they want to mutate the girl, but can't. And that might mean they may ask me to help, and then I'll see something no living wizard has seen. I'll learn something no living wizard has learned. Their famous grasses and herbs, the secret virus cultures, the renowned mysterious recipes. And I will be the one to give the child a number of elixirs who will watch the changes of mutation, who will watch with my own eyes. Watch the ashen-haired child die. Oh no. Triss shuddered again. Never. Not at such a price. Besides, she thought, I've probably got excited too soon again. That's probably not what this is about. We talked over supper, gossiped about this and that. I tried to guide the conversation to the child's surprise several times to no avail. they changed the subject at once. She had watched them. Vesemir had been tense and troubled, Geralt uneasy, Lambert and Eskel falsely merry and talkative, Cohen so natural as to be unnatural. The only one who had been sincere and open was Ciri, rosy-cheeked from the cold, dishevelled, happy and devilishly voracious. They had eaten beer pottage, thick with croutons and cheese, and Ciri had been surprised they had not served mushrooms as well. They had drunk cider, but the girl had been given water, and was clearly both astonished and revolted by it. "Where's the salad?" she had yelled, and Lambert had rebuked her sharply and ordered her to take her elbows off the table. Mushrooms and salad. In December? Of course, thought Triss. They're feeding her those legendary cave saprophytes, a mountain plant unknown to science, giving her the famous infusions of their mysterious herbs to drink. The girl is developing quickly, is acquiring a witch's infernal fitness. Naturally, without the mutation, without the risk, without the hormonal upheaval. But the magician must not know this. It is to be kept a secret from the magician. They aren't going to tell me anything. They aren't going to show me anything. I saw how that girl ran. I saw how she danced on the beam with her sword, agile and swift, full of a dancer's near feline grace, moving like an acrobat. I must, she thought. I absolutely must see her body. See how she's developing under the influence of whatever it is they're feeding her. And what if I managed to steal samples of these mushrooms and salads and take them away? Well, well. And trust? I don't give a fig for your trust, witches. There's cancer out there in the world, smallpox, tetanus and leukemia. There are allergies, there's cot death. And you're keeping your mushrooms, which could perhaps be distilled and turned into life-saving medicines, hidden away from the world. You're keeping them a secret, even from me, and others to whom you declare your friendship, respect and trust. Even I'm forbidden to see not just the laboratorium, but even the bloody mushrooms. So why did you bring me here? Me, a magician. Magic. Triss giggled. Ha, she thought. Witches, I've got you. Ciri scared you just as she did me. She withdrew into a daydream, started to prophesy, gave out an aura which, after all, you can sense almost as well as I can. She automatically reached for something psychokinetically, or bent a pewter spoon with her wheel as she stared at it during lunch. She answered questions you only thought, and maybe even some which you were afraid to ask yourselves. And you felt fear. You realized that your surprise is more surprising than you had imagined. You realized that you have the source in Kaer Morhen, and that you can't manage without a magician. And you don't have a single friendly magician, not a single one you could trust, apart from me and Yennefer. The wind howled, banged the shutter, and swelled the tapestry. Triss rolled onto her back, and, lost in thought, started to bite her thumbnail. Geralt had not invited Yennefer. He had invited her. Does that mean... Who knows? Maybe. But if it's as I think, then why? Why hasn't he come to me? She shouted quietly into the darkness, angry and aroused. She was answered by the wind howling amidst the ruins. The morning was sunny but devilishly cold. Triss woke, chilled through and through, without having had enough sleep, but finally assured and decided. She was the last to go down to the hall. She accepted the tribute of gazers which rewarded her efforts. She had changed her travel clothes for an attractive but simple dress, and had skillfully applied magical scents and non-magical but incredibly expensive cosmetics. She ate her porridge chatting with the witches about unimportant and trivial matters. "Water again," muttered Ciri suddenly, peering into her tumbler. "My teeth go numb when I drink water. I want some juice, that blue one." "Don't slouch," said Lambert. stealing a glance at Triss from the corner of his eye. "And don't wipe your mouth with your sleeve. Finish your food. It's time for training. The days are getting shorter."
"Geralt,"
Triss finished her porridge.
"Ciri fell on the trail yesterday. Nothing serious, but it was because of that jester's outfit she wears. It all fits so badly, and it hinders her movements."
Vesemir cleared his throat and turned his eyes away.
"Aha,"
thought the enchantress.
"So it's your work, Master of the Sword. Predictable enough. Ciri's short tunic does look as if it has been cut out with a knife and sewn together with an arrowhead." "The days are indeed getting shorter," she continued, not waiting for a comment. "But we're going to make today shorter still. Ciri, have you finished? Come with me, if you please. We shall make some vital adjustments to your uniform."
"She's been running around in this for a year, Marigold," said Lambert angrily. "And everything was fine until—"
"Until a woman arrived who can't bear to look at clothes in poor taste which don't fit. You're right, Lambert. But a woman has arrived, and the old order's collapsed. A time of great change has arrived. Come on, Ciri."
The girl hesitated, looked at Geralt. Geralt nodded his agreement, and smiled, pleasantly, just as he had smiled in the past when... Triss turned her eyes away. His smile was not for her. Ciri's little room was a faithful replica of the Witcher's quarters. It was, like theirs, devoid of almost all fittings and furniture. There was practically nothing there beside a few planks nailed together to form a bed, a stool, and a trunk. Witchers decorated the walls and doors of their quarters with the skins of animals they killed when hunting. Stags, lynx, wolves, and even wolverines. On the door of Ciri's little room, however, hung the skin of an enormous rat with a hideous scaly tail. Triss fought back her desire to tear the stinking abomination down and throw it out of the window. The girl, standing by the bed, stared at her expectantly.
"We'll try," said the enchantress, "to make this sheath fit a little better. I've always had a knack for cutting and sewing, so I ought to be able to manage this goatskin too. And you, little Witcher girl, have you ever had a needle in your hand? Have you been taught anything other than making holes with a sword in sacks of straw?" "When I was in Transriver, in Kargan, I had to spin," muttered Ciri unwillingly. "They didn't give me any sewing, because I only spoilt the linen and wasted thread. They had to undo everything. The spinning was terribly boring. Yuck." "True," giggled Triss. "It's hard to find anything more boring. I hated spinning too." "And did you have to?" "I did, because—" "But you're a magician. You can conjure anything up. That amazing dress, did you conjure it up?" "No." Triss smiled. "Nor did I sew it myself. I'm not that talented." "And my clothes, how are you going to make them? Conjure them up?" "There's no need. A magic needle is enough, one which we shall charm into working more vigorously. And if there's a need—"
Triss slowly ran her hand across the torn hole in the sleeve of Ciri's jacket, murmuring a spell while stimulating an amulet to work. Not a trace remained of the hole. Ciri squealed with joy.
"That's magic! I'm going to have a magical jacket! Wow!" "Only until I make you an ordinary, but good one, right? Now take all that off, young lady, and change into something else. These aren't your only clothes, surely?"
Ciri shook her head, lifted the lid of the trunk, and showed her a faded loose dress, a dark grey tunic, a linen shirt, and a woolen blouse resembling a penitent's sack.
"This is mine," she said. "This is what I came in. But I don't wear it now. It's woman's stuff." "I understand." Triss grimaced mockingly. "Woman's or not, for the time being you'll have to change into it. Well, get on with it. Get undressed. Let me help you." "Damn it! What's this, Ciri?"
The girl's shoulders were covered in massive bruises, suffused with blood. Most of them had already turned yellow. Some were fresh.
"What the hell is this?"
the magician repeated angrily.
"Who beat you like this?" "This?"
Ciri looked at her shoulders as if surprised by the number of bruises.
"Oh, this? That was the windmill. I was too slow." "What windmill? Bloody hell!" "The windmill," repeated Ciri,
raising her huge eyes to look up at the magician. "It's a sort of... well, I'm using it to learn to dodge while attacking. It's got these paws made of sticks, and it turns and waves the paws. You have to jump very quickly and dodge. You have to learn a leaf rex. If you haven't got the leaf rex, the windmill wallops you with a stick. At the beginning, the windmill gave me a really terribly horrible thrashing, but now... Take the leggings and shirt off." "Oh, sweet gods! Dear girl, can you really walk? Run?"
Both hips and her left thigh were black and blue with hematomas and swellings. Ciri shuddered and hissed, pulling away from the magician's hand. Triss swore viciously in Dwarvish, using inexpressibly foul language.
"Was that the windmill too?"
she asked, trying to remain calm.
"This? No. This was the windmill."
Ciri pointed indifferently to an impressive bruise below her left knee, covering her shin.
"And these other ones? They were the pendulum. I practiced my fencing steps on the pendulum. Geralt says I'm already good at the pendulum. He says I've got... flair. I've got flair. And if you run out of flair?"
Triss ground her teeth together.
"I take it the pendulum thumps you."
"But of course," the girl confirmed, looking at her, clearly surprised at this lack of knowledge.
"It thumps you? And how? And here? On your side? What was that? A smith's hammer?"
Ciri hissed with pain and blushed.
"I fell off the comb." "And the comb thumped you?"
finished Triss, controlling herself with increasing difficulty. Ciri snorted.
"How can a comb thump you when it's buried in the ground? It can't. I just fell. I was practicing a jumping pirouette, and it didn't work. That's where the bruise came from, because I hit a post." "And you lay there for 2 days in pain, finding it hard to breathe?" "Not at all. Cohen rubbed it and put me straight back on the comb. You have to, you know, otherwise you catch fear." "What? You catch fear?"
Ciri repeated proudly, brushing her ashen fringe from her forehead.
"Didn't you know? Even when something bad happens to you, you have to go straight back to that piece of equipment, or you get frightened. And if you're frightened, you'll be hopeless at the exercise. You mustn't give up. Geralt said so." "I have to remember that maxim," the enchantress murmured through her teeth, "and that it came from Geralt. Not a bad prescription for life, although I'm not sure it applies in every situation. But it is easy to put it into practice at someone else's expense. So you mustn't give up. Even though you're being thumped and beaten in 1,000 ways, you're to get up and carry on practicing." "Of course. A witch is not afraid of anything." "Is that so? And you, Ciri, you aren't afraid of anything? Answer truthfully."
The girl turned away and bit her lip.
"You won't tell anybody?"
"I won't."
"I'm frightened of 2 pendulums. 2 at the same time. And the windmill, but only when it's set to go fast. And there's also a long balance. I still have to go on that, with a safety device. Lambert says I'm a sissy and a wimp, but that's not true. Geralt told me my weight is distributed a little differently because I'm a girl. I've simply got to practice more and less. I wanted to ask you something. May I?"
"You may."
"If you know magic and spells, if you can cast them, can you turn me into a boy?"
"No," Triss replied in an icy tone.
"I can't."
The little witcher girl was clearly troubled.
"But could you at least what? Could you do something so I don't have to..."
Ciri blushed.
"I'll whisper it in your ear."
"Go on." Triss leaned over.
"I'm listening."
Ciri, growing even redder, brought her head closer to the enchantress's chestnut hair. Triss sat up abruptly, her eyes flaming.
"Today? Now?" "Hell and bloody damnation!"
the enchantress yelled, and kicked the stool so hard that it hit the door and brought down the rat skin.
"Pox, plague, shit and leprosy! I'm gonna kill those cursed idiots!"
"Calm down, Marigold," said Lambert. "It's unhealthy to get so worked up, especially with no reason."
"Don't preach at me, and stop calling me Marigold. But best of all, stop talking altogether. I'm not speaking to you." Vesemir, Geralt, have any of you seen how terribly battered this child is? She hasn't got a single healthy spot on her body.
Dear child, said Vesemir gravely, don't let yourself get carried away by your emotions. You were brought up differently. You've seen children being brought up in another way. Ciri comes from the south, where girls and boys are brought up in the same way, like the elves. She was put on a pony when she was 5, and when she was 8, she was already riding out hunting. She was taught to use a bow, javelin, and sword. A bruise is nothing new to Ciri.
Don't give me that nonsense, Triss flared. Don't pretend you're stupid. This is not some pony or horse or sleigh ride. This is Kaer Morhen. On these windmills and pendulums of yours, on this killer path of yours, dozens of boys have broken their bones and twisted their necks. Boys who were hard, seasoned vagabonds like you, found on roads and pulled out of gutters. Sinewy scamps and good-for-nothings, pretty experienced despite their short lives. What chance has Ciri got? Even though she's been brought up in the south with elven methods, even growing up under the hand of a battle-axe like Lioness Calanthe, that little one was and still is a princess. Delicate skin, slight build, light bones. She's a girl. What do you want to turn her into, a witcher?
That girl, said Geralt, quietly and calmly, that petite, delicate princess lived through the massacre of Sintra. Left entirely to her own devices, she stole past Nilfgaard's cohorts. She successfully fled the marauders who prowled the villages, plundering and murdering anything that still lived. She survived on her own for 2 weeks in the forests of Transriver, entirely alone. She spent a month roaming with a pack of fugitives, slogging as hard as all the others and starving like all the others. For almost half a year, having been taken in by a peasant family, she worked on the land and with the livestock. Believe me, Triss, life has tried, seasoned and hardened her no less than good-for-nothings like us, who were brought to Kaer Morhen from the highways. Ciri is no weaker than unwanted bastards like us, who are left with witches in taverns like kittens in a wicker basket. And her gender, what difference does that make?
You still ask? You still dare ask that? Yelled the magician. What difference does it make? Only that the girl, not being like you, has her days, and bears them exceptionally badly, and you wanted to tear her lungs out on the killer and some bloody windmills? Despite her outrage, Triss felt an exquisite satisfaction at the sight of the sheepish expressions of the young witches and Vesemir's jaw suddenly dropping open. You didn't even know. She nodded in what was now a calm, concerned and gentle reproach. You're pathetic guardians. She's ashamed to tell you because she was taught not to mention such complaints to men. And she's ashamed of the weakness, the pain, and the fact that she is less fit. Has any one of you thought about that? Taken any interest in it? Or tried to guess what might be the matter with her? Maybe her very first bleed happened here, in Kaer Morhen, and she cried to herself at night, unable to find any sympathy, consolation, or even understanding from anyone? Has any one of you given it any thought whatsoever?
Stop it, Triss, moaned Geralt quietly. That's enough. You've achieved what you wanted, and maybe even more.
The devil take it, cursed Cohen. We've turned out to be right idiots. There's no two ways about it, eh, Vesemir? And you—
Silence, growled the old witcher. Not a word. It was Eskel's behaviour which was most unlikely. He got up, approached the enchantress, bent down low, took her hand and kissed it respectfully. She swiftly withdrew her hand, not so as to demonstrate her anger and annoyance, but to break the pleasant, piercing vibration triggered by the witcher's touch. Eskel emanated powerfully, more powerfully than Geralt. Triss, he said, rubbing the hideous scar on his cheek with embarrassment. Help us. We ask you. Help us, Triss. The enchantress looked him in the eye and pursed her lips. With what? What am I to help you with, Eskel? Eskel rubbed his cheek again, looking at Geralt. The white-haired witcher bowed his head, hiding his eyes behind his hand. Vesemir cleared his throat loudly. At that moment, the door creaked open,
and Ciri entered the hall. Vesemir's hawking changed into something like a wheeze, a loud, indrawn breath. Lambert opened his mouth. Triss suppressed a laugh. Ciri, her hair cut and styled, was walking towards them with tiny steps, carefully holding up a dark blue dress, shortened and adjusted, and still showing the signs of having been carried in a saddlebag. Another present from the enchantress gleamed around the girl's neck, a little black viper made of lacquered leather with a ruby eye and gold clasp. Ciri stopped in front of Vesemir. Not quite knowing what to do with her hands, she planted her thumbs behind her belt. "I cannot train today," she recited in the utter silence, slowly and emphatically, "for I am... She looked at the enchantress. Triss winked at her, smirking like a rascal, well pleased with his mischief, and moved her lips to prompt the memorized lines. "Indisposed," ended Ciri loudly and proudly, turning her nose up almost to the ceiling. Vesemir hawked again. But Eskil, dear Eskil, kept his head and once more behaved as was fitting. "Of course," he said casually, smiling, "we understand, and clearly we will postpone your exercises until your indisposition has passed. We will also cut the theory short, and if you feel unwell, we will put it aside for the time being too. If you need any medication or—" "I'll take care of that," Triss cut in just as casually. "Aha!" Only now did Ciri blush a little. She looked at the old witcher. "Uncle Vesemir, I've asked Triss, that is, Miss Marigold, to stay here with us, for longer, for a long time. But Triss said you have to agree forsooth. Uncle Vesemir, say yes."
"I agree," Vesemir wheezed out. "Of course I agree."
"We are very happy." Only now did Geralt take his hand from his forehead. "We are extremely pleased, Triss." The enchantress nodded slightly towards him, and innocently fluttered her eyelashes, winding a chestnut lock around her finger. Geralt's face seemed almost graven from stone. "You behaved very properly and politely, Ciri," he said, "offering Miss Marigold our ongoing hospitality in Kaer Morhen. I am proud of you." Ciri reddened and smiled broadly. The enchantress gave her the next prearranged sign. "And now," said the girl, turning her nose up even higher, "I will leave you alone, because you no doubt wish to talk over various important matters with Triss. Miss Marigold, Uncle Vesemir, gentlemen, I bid you goodbye, for the time being." She curtsied gracefully, then left the hall, walking up the stairs slowly and with dignity.
"Bloody hell!"
Lambert broke the silence. "To think I didn't believe that she really is a princess."
"Have you understood, you idiots?"
Vesemir cast his eye around. "If she puts a dress on in the morning, I don't want to see any exercises. Understood?" Eskil and Cohen bestowed a look which was entirely devoid of respect on the old man. Lambert snorted loudly. Geralt stared at the enchantress, and the enchantress smiled back. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you, Triss." Conditions? Eskil was clearly worried. "But we've already promised to ease Ciri's training, Triss. What other conditions do you want to impose?" "Well, maybe conditions isn't a very nice phrase, so let us call it advice. I will give you 3 pieces of advice, and you are going to abide by each of them. If, of course, you really want me to stay and help you bring up the little one." "We're listening," said Geralt. "Go on, Triss." "Above all," she began, smiling maliciously, "Ciri's menu is to be more varied, and the secret mushrooms and mysterious greens in particular have to be limited." Geralt and Cohen controlled their expressions wonderfully. Lambert and Eskil a little less so. Vesemir not at all. But then, she thought, looking at his comically embarrassed expression, in his days the world was a better place. Duplicity was a character flaw to be ashamed of. Sincerity did not bring shame. Fewer infusions of your mystery-shrouded herbs, she continued, trying not to giggle. And more milk. You have goats here. Milking is no great art. You'll see, Lambert. You'll learn how to do it in no time.
Triss, started Geralt.
Listen. No, you listen. You haven't subjected Ciri to violent mutations, haven't touched her hormones, haven't tried any elixirs or grasses on her. And that's to be praised. That was sensible, responsible, and humane. You haven't harmed her with any of your poisons. All the more so, you must not cripple her now.
What are you talking about?
The mushrooms, whose secrets you guard so carefully, she explained, do indeed keep the girl wonderfully fit and strengthen her muscles. The herbs guarantee an ideal metabolic rate and hasten her development. All this, taken together and helped along by grueling training, causes certain changes in her build, in her adipose tissue. She's a woman. And as you haven't crippled her hormonal system, do not cripple her physically now. She might hold it against you later, if you so ruthlessly deprive her of her womanly attributes. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Andal, muttered Lambert, brazenly eyeing Triss's breasts, which strained against the fabric of her dress.
Eskil cleared his throat and looked daggers at the young witcher.
At the moment, Geralt asked slowly, also gliding his eyes over this and that, you haven't noticed anything irreversible in her, I hope?
No, she smiled. Fortunately not. She is developing healthily and normally, and is built like a young dryad. It's a pleasure to look at her. But I ask you to be moderate in using your accelerants.
We will, promised Vesemir. Thank you for the warning, child. What else? You said 3 pieces of advice?
Indeed. This is the second. Ciri must not be allowed to grow wild. She has to have contact with the world, with her peers. She has to be decently educated and prepared for a normal life. Let her wave her sword about for the time being. You won't turn her into a witcher without mutation anyway. But having a witcher's training won't harm her. Times are hard and dangerous. She'll be able to defend herself when necessary, like an elf. But you must not bury her alive here in the middle of nowhere. She has to enter normal life.
Her normal life went up in flames along with Sintra, murmured Geralt. But regarding this, Triss, as usual, you're right. We've already thought about it. In spring, I'm going to take her to the temple school, to Nennika, to Elender.
That's a very good idea and a wise decision. Nennika is an exceptional woman, and Goddess Melitola's sanctuary an exceptional place. Safe, sure, and it guarantees an appropriate education for the girl. Does Ciri know yet?
She does. She kicked up a fuss for a few days, but finally accepted the idea. Now she's even looking forward to spring with impatience, excited by the prospect of an expedition to Temeria. She's interested in the world.
So was I at her age. Triss smiled. And that comparison brings us dangerously close to the third piece of advice, the most important piece. And you already know what it is. Don't pull silly faces. I'm a magician, have you forgotten? I don't know how long it took you to recognize Ciri's magical abilities. It took me less than half an hour. After that, I knew who, or rather what, the girl is.
And what is she?
A source.
That's impossible.
It's possible, certain even. Ciri is a source, and has mediumistic powers. What is more, these powers are very, very worrying. And you, my dear witchers, are perfectly well aware of this. You've noticed these powers, and they have worried you too. That is the one and only reason you brought me here to Kaer Morhen. Am I right? The one and only reason?
Yes, Vesemir confirmed, after a moment's silence.
Triss breathed an imperceptible sigh of relief. For a moment, she was afraid that Geralt would be the one to confirm it. The first snow fell the following day. Fine snowflakes initially, but soon turning into a blizzard. It fell throughout the night, and in the early morning, the walls of Kaer Morhen were drowned beneath a snowdrift. There could be no question of running the killer, especially since Ciri was still not feeling very well. Triss suspected that the witch's accelerants might be the cause of the girl's menstrual problems. She could not be sure, however, knowing practically nothing about the drugs, and Ciri was, beyond doubt, the only girl in the world to whom they had been administered. She did not share her suspicions with the witches. She did not want to worry or annoy them, and preferred to apply her own methods. She gave Ciri elixirs to drink, tied a string of active jaspers around her waist under her dress, and forbade her to exert herself in any way, especially by chasing around wildly hunting rats with a sword. Ciri was bored. She roamed the castle sleepily and, finally, for lack of any other amusement, joined Cohen, who was cleaning the stable, grooming the horses, and repairing a harness. Geralt, to the enchantress's rage, disappeared somewhere and appeared only towards evening, bearing a dead goat. Triss helped him skin his prey. Although she sincerely detested the smell of meat and blood, she wanted to be near the Witcher. Near him. As near as possible. A cold, determined resolution was growing in her. She did not want to sleep alone any longer.
"Triss!"
yelled Ciri suddenly, running down the stairs, stamping.
"Can I sleep with you tonight? Triss, please, please say yes, please, Triss!"
The snow fell and fell. It brightened up only with the arrival of Midinvierne, the day of the winter equinox.
On the third day all the children died save one, a male barely 10. Hitherto agitated by a sudden madness, he fell all at once into deep stupor. His eyes took on a glassy gaze. Incessantly with his hands did he clutch at clothing, or brandish them in the air as if desirous of catching a quill. His breathing grew loud and hoarse. Sweat, cold, clammy and malodorous appeared on his skin. Then was he once more given elixir through the vein, and the seizure it did return. This time a nosebleed did ensue, coughing turned to vomiting, after which the male weakened entirely and became inert. For 2 days more did symptoms not subside. The child's skin, hitherto drenched in sweat, grew dry and hot. The pulse ceased to be full and firm, albeit remaining of average strength, slow rather than fast. No more did he wake, nor did he scream. Finally came the 7th day. The male awoke and opened his eyes, and his eyes were as those of a viper.
Carla Danusia Crest, The Trial of Grasses and Other Secret Witcher Practices, seen with my own eyes. Manuscript exclusively accessible to the Chapter of Wizards.